The massive space station Concordia Prime hung in the void like a giant metal city. Its silver walls stretched for miles in every direction, with thousands of lights twinkling across its surface. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports. This was the heart of the Galactic Defense Alliance, where the most powerful species in the galaxy made their most important decisions. Commander. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around the main docking bay. He had never seen anything like it. Creatures that looked like walking crystals moved past him, their bodies sparkling in the artificial light. Giant lizard-like beings in military uniforms talked in deep, rumbling voices. Flying insects the size of small cars buzzed overhead, their wings making a sound like distant thunder. Jake adjusted his simple blue uniform and checked his watch. He was here to ask for help, and he knew it would not be easy. The human race was new to this galactic community. Most of these alien species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans had only recently figured out how to leave their own solar system. "Stay close," Jake told his companion, Captain Lisa Carter. She was his weapons officer and one of the smartest people he knew. Lisa carried a metal briefcase filled with information about human military technology. "Remember, we need their help. The Void Swarm is coming, and Earth cannot fight them alone," Lisa nodded. She had seen the reports from the outer colonies. The Void Swarm was like nothing anyone had ever faced before. They were machines, but they moved like a living thing. They consumed entire worlds, turning everything into more of themselves. 17 star systems had already fallen to them, and they were getting closer to human space every day. The two humans walked through the corridors of the station. Everything was huge, built for species much larger than humans. Jake felt like a child walking through a building made for giants. Other beings barely looked at them as they passed. To most of the galaxy, humans were just another new species trying to prove they belonged. They finally reached the War Council chamber. It was an enormous round room, with seats arranged in circles around a central platform. Representatives from every major species in the Alliance sat in their designated areas. Jake could see the crystal beings called the Keth Empire in one section, their bodies glowing softly with inner light. The Saurian Confederation took up another large area, their reptilian forms impressive in their military dress. The insectoid creatures of the hive buzzed quietly among themselves. In the center of it all, floating in the air like a living cloud of light, was a being from the ethereal consortium. It had no solid form, just swirling energy that changed colors as it moved. Jake had been told these beings could speak directly into your mind. "Commander Morrison of the human fleet," announced a mechanical voice from the chamber speakers. "You may present your request to the Alliance." Jake walked to the center platform. His footsteps echoed in the huge room. He could feel hundreds of eyes and other types of sensors watching him. He cleared his throat and began to speak. "Honored members of the Galactic Defense Alliance," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "The human race comes before you today to request membership in the Alliance and permission to join the fight against the Void Swarm. We know we are new to this galaxy, but we want to help defend it." A sound like breaking glass came from the Keth section. Jake realized it was their version of laughter. Admiral Zixthara, the leader of the Keth Empire, stood up. Her crystal body was tall and sharp, like a living sculpture made of blue diamonds. "And what exactly can humans offer in this fight?" she asked, her voice like the sound of wind chimes. "We have seen your ships. They are small and simple. Your technology is centuries behind our own." Jake tried to stay calm. "We may not have the most advanced technology, but we have experience in warfare. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know how to adapt and survive." General Vorthak of the Saurian Confederation laughed, a deep sound like distant thunder. He was massive even for his species, with dark green scales and yellow eyes. "Fighting wars with what? We have examined your weapon specifications. You still use kinetic projectiles. Metal bullets fired by chemical explosives. How primitive." Lisa stepped forward. "Sir, If I may explain the advantages of kinetic weapons? Advantages? Interrupted Hive Queen Zocht H. Her voice was a strange clicking sound that the translation devices turned into words. There are no advantages to throwing metal rocks at your enemies. My warriors use bioelectric disruptors that can shut down any nervous system instantly. The Saurians have plasma cannons that can melt through starship armor. The Keth can focus starlight itself into weapons of incredible power. The floating energy being in the center pulsed brighter. When it spoke, Jake heard the words directly in his mind rather than through his ears. We have transcended the need for crude matter-based weapons, Fluxara said. Your primitive ammunition would be useless against the Void Swarm's adaptive shielding technology. Jake felt his face getting red with frustration. Our weapons may seem simple, but they work. They are reliable. They do not break down or fail when you need them most. Admiral Zixthara made the glass-breaking sound again. Reliable? Commander, the Void Swarm has technology that can adapt to any threat in minutes. They have consumed civilizations far more advanced than yours. What makes you think metal bullets will succeed where energy weapons have failed? Because sometimes the old ways are the best ways, Lisa said firmly. A bullet does not need complex technology to work. It follows the basic laws of physics. It cannot be hacked or jammed or countered by electronic warfare. General Vorthak shook his massive head. You speak like primitives who have never seen real war. The Void Swarm destroyed the Calarian Empire, and they had weapon technology that could crack planets in half. They consumed the bright cluster, and those beings could manipulate gravity itself as a weapon. What hope do metal slugs have against such power? The chamber filled with sounds of agreement from the various alien species. Jake could hear clicking, hissing, buzzing, and other noises that the translation devices could not convert into words he understood. It was clear that no one in the room took human weapons seriously. Please, Jake said, raising his voice. We are not asking to lead the fight, we just want to help. Give us a chance to prove ourselves. Fluxara pulsed again, and its mental voice carried a tone of dismissive amusement. Very well, humans, we will allow you to join our forces. But do not expect to be placed in the front lines with such inadequate equipment. You will be assigned to support duties. Cleanup operations in sectors we have already cleared. Perhaps you can use your metal bullets to finish off damaged void drones that our real weapons have already disabled. Jake clenched his fists but managed to keep his voice steady. We accept whatever role you give us. Thank you for this opportunity, Admiral Zixthara's crystal form sparkled. Do not thank us yet, Commander. When you see the true power of the Void Swarm, you may wish you had stayed safely in your own small corner of the galaxy. But perhaps this will be a good learning experience for your species. You will see how real civilizations fight real wars. The meeting was clearly over. Jake and Lisa left the chamber, walking back through the corridors of the massive station. Other beings continued to ignore them, but Jake thought he could sense their amusement. The humans with their primitive weapons, playing at being warriors among the real powers of the galaxy. That went well, Lisa said quietly when they were alone. At least they said yes, Jake replied. Even if they think we are useless. Maybe. Being underestimated is not such a bad thing, Lisa said. Sometimes it is better when your enemies do not take you seriously. Jake looked out through a window at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, the Void Swarm was coming. Soon, everyone would see what human weapons could really do. He just hoped it would be enough to make a difference when the time came. The massive space station, Concordia Prime, hung in the void like a giant metal city. Its silver walls stretched for miles in every direction, with thousands of lights twinkling across its surface. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports. This was the heart of the Galactic Defense Alliance, where the most powerful species in the galaxy made their most important decisions. Commander, Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around the main docking bay. He had never seen anything like it. Creatures that looked like walking crystals moved past him, their bodies sparkling in the artificial light. Giant lizard-like beings in military uniforms talked in deep, rumbling voices. Flying insects the size of small cars buzzed overhead, their wings making a sound like distant thunder. Jake adjusted his simple blue uniform and checked his watch. He was here to ask for help, and he knew it would not be easy. The human race was new to this galactic community. Most of these alien species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans had only recently figured out how to leave their own solar system. "Stay close," Jake told his companion, Captain Lisa Carter. She was his weapons officer and one of the smartest people he knew. Lisa carried a metal briefcase filled with information about human military technology. "Remember, we need their help." 3 weeks after the meeting on Concordia Prime, the combined fleets of the Galactic Defense Alliance moved through space toward the Kepler 442 system. It was a beautiful sight to see. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different worlds traveled together in perfect formation. The crystal ships of the Keth Empire sparkled like flying jewels. The massive metal warships of the Saurian Confederation looked like flying fortresses. The organic vessels of the Hive moved through space like living creatures, swimming through an invisible ocean. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching the alien fleets through the main view screen. His ship was much smaller than most of the others, and it looked plain compared to the exotic designs around it. The human fleet had been placed at the very back of the formation, just as the Alliance had promised. They were the cleanup crew, expected to do nothing more than salvage operations after the real fighting was over. "Contact in 30 minutes, reported Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez from his position at the sensor station. "The Void swarm ships are holding position around the fourth planet. Looks like millions of them." Jake nodded. He had studied the intelligence reports, but seeing the numbers on his screen still made his stomach feel tight. The Void swarm was not like any enemy anyone had faced before. They were machines, but they moved and thought like a living creature. Each individual drone was connected to all the others through some kind of shared intelligence that no one fully understood. Captain Lisa Carter stood beside him, checking her weapons display for the 100th time. "All railguns are charged and ready," she said, "though I doubt we will get to use them from back here." Through the communication system, they could hear the chatter from the alien fleets ahead of them. The Alliance commanders were confident, almost excited. This would be their chance to show the galaxy's newest members how real space battles were fought. "All ships, this is Admiral Zixthara," came the crystal-clear voice over the fleet communication channel. "We are approaching the enemy position. Prepare your primary weapon systems. Today we will show these machines that no force in the galaxy can stand against the combined might of the Alliance." Jake watched as the front lines of the fleet began to spread out into attack formation. The crystal ships of the Keth Empire moved gracefully through space, their hulls beginning to glow brighter as they charged their starlight weapons. The Saurian warships turned their massive gun turrets toward the enemy, plasma beginning to build up in the barrel chambers. The Hive ships seemed to pulse with life as they prepared their bioelectric weapons. "Enemy ships detected," called out Lieutenant Rodriguez. "They are moving to intercept." Holy cow, there are a lot of them. On the view screen, Jake could see them now. The Void swarm drones looked like black drops of liquid metal floating through space. They had no lights, no markings, nothing that suggested they were built by any living creature. They absorbed light instead of reflecting it, making them hard to see against the darkness of space. As they moved, they seemed to flow together like water, forming and reforming into different patterns. "This is General Vorthek to all ships," came the deep, rumbling voice of the Saurian commander. "We are in range of the enemy. All units, you may fire when ready." The battle began with a display of power that took Jake's breath away. The Keth ships fired first, sending beams of concentrated starlight across the void. The light was so bright that Jake had to squint even through the filtered view screen. Where the beams hit the Void drones, the machines exploded in brilliant flashes of fire and metal. The Saurian plasma cannons fired next. Streams of superheated matter raced across space like miniature suns. When they hit their targets, the void drones simply melted away, their dark hulls unable to withstand temperatures that could boil steel in seconds. The hive ships released clouds of living projectiles that moved through space like angry wasps. These bioweapons sought out the enemy drones with predatory intelligence, striking with electrical discharges that should have shut down any electronic system for the first few minutes. It looked like the Alliance weapons were completely effective. Void drones exploded and died by the hundreds. The alien commanders congratulated each other over the communication channels. Some even began talking about how quickly they would finish this battle and move on to liberate the next occupied system. But then something terrible began to happen. The surviving void drones started to change. Jake watched in horror as their black hulls began to shift and alter their shape. Some became reflective like mirrors, bouncing their starlight beams back into space harmlessly. Others developed strange electromagnetic fields around them that made the saurian plasma weapons bend away without hitting their targets. "What are they doing?" Lisa asked, staring at her sensor readings. Lieutenant Rodriguez was working frantically at his station. "The drones are adapting, sir. They are changing their hull composition and defensive systems in real time. It is like they are learning how to defend against each weapon as they encounter it." The hive bioweapons were the next to become useless. The void drones began emitting counter-frequencies that neutralized the electrical attacks before they could reach their targets. Within minutes, the living projectiles were floating harmlessly in space, unable to function. "Impossible," came Admiral Zixthara's voice over the communications. But now she sounded worried instead of confident. "Our weapons are having no effect." "How can they adapt so quickly?" Jake watched as the tide of battle turned completely around. The Void Swarm drones, now immune to the Alliance's most advanced weapons, began their counterattack. They moved forward, in perfect coordination, their dark hulls seeming to drink in the light from the disabled weapons that tried uselessly to stop them. The first Alliance ship to fall was a Keth cruiser. The Void drones swarmed over it like ants, and within seconds the beautiful crystal hull began to crack and shatter. The ship broke apart in a shower of sparkling fragments that scattered through space. General Vorthak's flagship was next. The massive Saurian dreadnought had armor thick enough to stop asteroid impacts, but the Void drones found ways through it as if the metal was paper. Dark shapes crawled across the ship's hull, and one by one its weapons went silent. "All ships, retreat!" came a panicked voice over the communication system. Jake could not tell which species it came from because the translation system was having trouble with the fear and desperation in the speaker's voice. "All advanced weapon systems have been neutralized. The enemy is adapting to everything we throw at them." More Alliance ships began to fall. The elegant formations broke apart as surviving vessels tried to escape. Some ships managed to jump to hyperspace, but others were caught by the incredibly fast void drones before they could flee. "Sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez said, his voice tight with fear, "we are receiving distress calls from the remaining Alliance ships. They are requesting immediate assistance." Jake stared at the viewscreen where the massacre was continuing. The most advanced weapons in the galaxy had become completely useless in a matter of minutes. Every exotic technology, every sophisticated system that the alien species had developed over thousands of years had been turned against them by an enemy that could adapt faster than they could change tactics. "Commander," Lisa said quietly, "the Alliance fleets are falling back toward our position. In a few minutes we are going to be the front line." Jake felt a cold weight in his stomach. The human fleet with their primitive metal bullets was about to face an enemy that had just defeated weapons that could crack planets and focus starlight into destructive beams. Every logical part of his mind told him that they should run, that there was no point in fighting an enemy that could adapt to any weapon, but another part of him, the part that remembered every human war and every time his species had been told they could not win, was starting to feel something different. The Void Swarm had adapted to energy weapons and bioweapons and every form of exotic technology the galaxy could produce. but they had never faced a simple tungsten bullet traveling at 30,000 meters per second. "All ships," Jake said. "Into his communication system, prepare for combat. Load kinetic rounds and charge the railguns. We are going in." "Sir," came the worried voice of Chief Engineer Pete Williams from the engine room. "Are you sure about this? If they can adapt to plasma cannons and starlight beams, what makes you think our bullets will work?" Jake looked at the approaching swarm of dark drones and smiled grimly. "Because, Chief, you cannot adapt to physics?" The used Defender shook as Commander Jake Morrison pushed the engines to maximum power. Around him, the other human ships were doing the same thing. Instead of running away like every smart military commander should do, the human fleet was charging straight toward the heart of the void swarm. "Sir, are you completely crazy?" called Chief Engineer Pete Williams over the communication system. His voice was tight with worry. "The most advanced weapons in the galaxy just failed against these things. What makes you think our simple bullets are going to be any different?" Jake gripped the armrests of his command chair as the ship accelerated. Through the view screen, he could see the dark shapes of the void drones growing larger. They moved, like a living thing, flowing and shifting as they approached. Behind them, the broken remains of Alliance ships drifted through space like monuments to failed technology. "Because, Chief," Jake said calmly, "you cannot adapt to physics." "Captain." Lisa Carter was running final checks on all weapon systems. Her fingers flew over the control panels as she prepared every railgun, every missile launcher, and every projectile weapon on the ship. "All kinetic weapons are loaded and ready," she reported. "Tungsten rods are charged to maximum velocity." "Lieutenant?" Sam Rodriguez watched his sensor displays with growing concern. "Sir, the void drones are responding to our approach. They are forming up into attack formation. Whatever adaptation protocols they used against the Alliance weapons, they are probably getting ready to use them against us too." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The void swarm was not stupid. They had just proven they could counter any weapon system within minutes of encountering it. They would be analyzing human weapons right now, preparing their defenses, getting ready to make kinetic projectiles as useless as they had made plasma cannons and energy beams. "Distance to target?" Jake asked. 30 seconds to optimal firing range," Lisa replied. The first void drones reached them faster than expected. They moved with incredible speed, their black hulls seeming to bend space around them. Jake could see them clearly now on the view screen. They looked like drops of liquid metal that had been stretched into the shape of arrows. There were no visible weapons, no obvious weak points, nothing that suggested how they managed to be so deadly. "Incoming!" Rodriguez shouted. The void drones opened fire with weapons that looked like streams of dark energy. The beams struck the defenders' shields and began to drain them rapidly. Jake had seen these same weapons tear through Alliance armor like it was paper. "Return fire," Jake ordered. Lisa's fingers hit the firing controls. The defender's main railgun spun up to full power and launched a tungsten rod at incredible speed. The metal projectile was no bigger than a pencil, but it was moving at 30,000 meters per second. The void drone tried to adapt. Jake could see its hull shifting and changing, becoming reflective to bounce back energy weapons. Electromagnetic fields appeared around it, designed to deflect plasma and redirect particle beams. The drone's entire surface rippled as it prepared to counter whatever exotic technology the humans might be using. Then the tungsten rod hit it. The drone exploded. Not the slow, controlled destruction that happened when its systems were overwhelmed by advanced technology, but a sudden, violent explosion as kinetic energy ripped through its hull. Metal and electronics scattered in all directions. The drones. Adaptive systems had no time to counter something that followed the basic laws of physics. "Direct hit," Lisa shouted with excitement. "Target destroyed." But there were thousands more drones coming toward them. The defenders' point defense systems opened fire, sending streams of smaller projectiles into the approaching swarm. Sergeant Amy Foster was manning one of the 20mm cannon turrets. and she watched in amazement as her simple bullets punched clean through drone armor that had laughed off plasma cannons. "This is impossible," she said over the communication system. "These things just shrugged off weapons that could melt steel, but my bullets are going through them like they are made of paper." Jake was starting to understand what was happening. "Rodriguez, are you getting readings on their defensive systems?" The sensor officer studied his displays with growing amazement. "Sir, they are trying to adapt, but they cannot figure out how to defend against kinetic weapons. Their hulls are shifting between different configurations, but none of them work. They keep trying to create electromagnetic barriers, but the bullets just fly right through them." The other human ships had joined the battle now. The UES Titan was firing its heavy railguns, sending larger tungsten rods into groups of drones. Each shot destroyed multiple targets as the metal projectiles carried enough momentum to punch through several hulls before finally stopping. The UES Constitution was using a different approach, firing clouds of smaller projectiles like an enormous shotgun. The tiny metal pellets spread out in a wide pattern, catching drones that tried to dodge in unexpected directions. "Sir," Chief Williams called from the engine room, "I am getting reports from the other ships. All kinetic weapons are working perfectly. The Void drones cannot adapt to any of them." Jake watched as more and more drones fell to human weapons. The mechanical swarm that had seemed unstoppable just minutes ago was being torn apart by technology that predated spaceflight. Simple bullets and artillery shells were destroying enemies that had consumed civilizations, capable of manipulating gravity and bending starlight. "This does not make sense," Rodriguez said, studying the data streaming across his screens. "These drones adapted to plasma weapons in seconds. They counter bioelectric attacks almost instantly. But they have been trying to defend against our bullets for 5 minutes now, and they still cannot do it." Lisa was reloading the main railgun when the answer came to her. "That is exactly the point," she said. "They are too smart for their own good. Their adaptation systems are designed to counter advanced technology. They can analyze energy frequencies, electromagnetic fields, exotic matter interactions, all the complex stuff that modern weapons use. But a bullet is just a piece of metal moving fast. There is nothing to analyze." The battle was turning into a massacre, but this time the Alliance was winning. Human ships that had been relegated to cleanup duty were cutting through the void. Swarm like a hot knife through butter. Every shot found its target. Every bullet did exactly what bullets had been designed to do for hundreds of years. Dr. Helen Parker, the fleet's science officer, was recording everything from her position on the Defender's research deck. "Commander, I am seeing something incredible here. The Void drones are trying every defensive configuration in their programming. They have attempted to counter energy weapons, particle beams, gravitational weapons, temporal distortion fields, and at least 50 other exotic technologies I cannot even identify. But they have no programming for dealing with simple kinetic projectiles." Jake started to laugh. He could not help it. The most advanced enemy the galaxy had ever faced was being defeated by weapons that his great-grandfather would have recognized. "It is like bringing a sword to a gunfight," he said, "except in reverse." More Alliance ships were starting to return to the battle. The survivors had seen what was happening and were trying to adapt their own weapons. The Keth began using their crystal technology to accelerate metal projectiles instead of generating energy beams. The Saurians started firing tungsten slugs using their plasma systems as propellant rather than weapon energy. Even the insectoid hive ships were adapting, launching metal projectiles with biomechanical force instead of their living ammunition. The Void Swarm's greatest strength had become their fatal weakness. Their ability to adapt to any weapon technology was useless against weapons that had no technology to adapt to. A tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds did not care about adaptive shielding or electromagnetic countermeasures. It followed Newton's laws with ruthless determination. As the last of the Void drones fell to human gunfire, Jake received a communication from Admiral Zixthara. Her crystal form appeared on his viewscreen, but now she looked very different from the arrogant commander who had mocked human weapons just weeks ago. "Commander Morrison," she said, her voice filled with something that sounded like awe. "How did you know?" Jake smiled. "Sometimes, Admiral, the old ways are the best ways." Word of humanity's victory spread through the surviving Alliance fleet like wildfire. Ships that had been running away in terror just minutes ago were now turning around and heading back toward the battle zone. The communication channels buzzed with excited chatter in dozens of different languages as the news traveled from ship to ship. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching as more and more Alliance vessels returned to join the fight. The battle was far from over. The main Void Swarm force was still out there, somewhere deeper in the Kepler 442 system. What they had just destroyed was only the advance guard. "Sir, we are receiving communication requests from Admiral Zixthara, General Vorthak, and Hive." "Queen Zoth," reported Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez. "They all want to speak with you directly," Jake nodded. "Put them through on a joint channel. I think they all need to hear the same thing." The main view screen split into 3 sections. Admiral Zixthara appeared on the left, her crystal form flickering with nervous energy. General Vorthak filled the center screen, his massive reptilian head looking humbled for the first time since Jake had met him. On the right, Hive Queen Zoth clicked her mandibles in what Jake had learned was a sign of deep thought among her species. "Commander Morrison," Admiral Zixthara began, "we need to understand what just happened. Our most advanced weapons were completely useless, but your simple projectiles cut through the enemy like they were made of air. How is this possible?" Captain Lisa Carter stepped up beside Jake. "Admiral, your weapons were not useless because they were weak. They were useless because they were too advanced. The Void Swarm's adaptation systems are designed to counter sophisticated technology. They can analyze and defend against energy weapons, plasma cannons, bioelectric disruptors, and any other complex system, but they cannot adapt to basic physics." General Vorthak shook his head slowly. "I do not understand. How can a simple metal bullet be more effective than a plasma cannon that can melt through starship armor?" "Because," Jake explained, "a plasma cannon creates superheated matter using electromagnetic fields and magnetic containment. There are dozens of ways to counter that if you understand the technology well enough. But a bullet is just a piece of metal moving very fast. There is no technology to counter. You cannot negotiate with momentum. You cannot hack inertia." Queen Zeke's clicking grew more rapid. "So you are saying that by remaining primitive, you became more advanced than all of us?" Lisa smiled. "Not primitive, practical. We never stopped using kinetic weapons because they work. They have worked for thousands of years, and they will keep working because they are based on laws of physics that do not change." Captain Ryan Brooks of the UES Titan joined the conversation from his own ship. "We are already seeing the void. Drones trying to adapt to our weapons, but they cannot figure it out. Their programming keeps looking for some kind of energy signature or technological pattern to counter, but there is nothing there. A tungsten rod moving at 50,000 meters per second will punch a hole through anything, no matter how smart that thing thinks it is." Dr. Helen Parker had been studying the destroyed Void drones for the past hour. She appeared on a smaller screen at the bottom of the display. "I've been analyzing the wreckage, and what I found is fascinating. These drones have adaptation systems that are incredibly sophisticated. They can counter virtually any form of advanced technology within minutes, but they have no defensive programming for kinetic weapons at all." Admiral Zixthara leaned forward, her crystal form sparkling with interest. "How is that possible? Surely any military force would encounter projectile weapons at some point." "That is exactly the problem," Dr. Parker explained. "The Void Swarm has been consuming advanced civilizations for who knows how long. Every species they encountered had moved beyond simple kinetic weapons. They were all using energy-based or exotic matter weapons. The Void Swarm adapted to counter those threats, but they never needed to develop defenses against something as basic as a bullet." Jake could see understanding dawning in the alien commanders' faces. They became victims of their own success. He said, by defeating every advanced civilization they encountered, they lost the ability to deal with simple solutions. The tactical situation was changing rapidly. Alliance ships were retrofitting their weapon systems as quickly as possible. The Keth had stopped trying to generate energy beams and were instead using their crystal technology to accelerate metal projectiles. Their ships looked strange now, with beautiful crystal formations being used as crude railguns, the Saurian. Ships were undergoing even more dramatic changes. General Vorthak's engineers had figured out how to use their plasma systems as propellant instead of weapons. They were loading tungsten slugs into their plasma cannons and using the superheated matter to launch the projectiles at incredible speeds. This feels wrong, General Vorthak admitted over the communication channel. We have spent centuries developing the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, and now we are turning them into fancy slingshots. Sometimes the best technology is knowing when not to use technology, Jake replied. Your plasma cannons are still incredibly advanced. You're just using them in a smarter way. The Hive ships were having the most trouble adapting. Their entire military philosophy was based on living weapons that could think and adapt on their own. But Queen Zakth was working with her bioengineers to develop new approaches. We are creating metal projectiles that are biomechanical systems can launch, she reported. It is strange for us to make weapons that cannot think for themselves, but we are learning. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Hayes was leading the human ground forces' preparation for the next phase of the battle. The Void Swarm had a command ship somewhere in the system, and they would need to board it to truly defeat the enemy. His voice came over the communication system with typical human directness. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to assault the most dangerous enemy the galaxy has ever seen. But remember what we just proved. Sometimes the best weapon is the simplest one. A bullet does not need to be smart. It just needs to be fast and hit its target. The rebuilt Alliance fleet was ready to continue the fight. Ships that had been fleeing in panic an hour ago were now forming up in attack formations, but everything was different now. Instead of exotic energy weapons and advanced technology, every ship was armed with some form of kinetic projectile weapon. Dr. Parker had discovered something else important during her analysis of the Void drone wreckage. Commander, I found the location of their command ship. It is a massive vessel hiding behind the fourth planet's largest moon. The individual drones? Get their adaptation programming from that central source. Jake studied the tactical display showing the position of the Void command ship. It was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the biggest Alliance vessel. If we can destroy or disable that command ship, the remaining drones will lose their ability to adapt to new threats. Admiral Zixthara S. form was glowing brighter now with excitement rather than fear. Then we finish this fight the human way. With metal projectiles and basic physics. Affirmative, Jake replied. All ships, prepare for the final assault. Load your heaviest kinetic rounds and target the command vessel. Today we teach the galaxies most advanced enemy that sometimes the old ways really are the best ways. The fleet began moving toward their final target. Ships from dozens of different worlds, all armed with weapons that would have been familiar to soldiers from hundreds of years ago. It was the strangest space battle in galactic history, and it was about to prove once and for all that complexity is not always better than simplicity. The Void Swarm was about to learn that you cannot adapt your way out of being hit by a very large piece of metal moving very fast. The Void Swarm command ship was unlike anything the Alliance fleet had ever seen. It hung in space behind the fourth planet's moon like a dark mountain made of metal and shadow. The ship was so massive that it had its own gravitational field, pulling debris and asteroids into orbit around it. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, studying the enemy vessel through the viewscreen. Even with all their recent victories, he felt a cold weight in his stomach. This was the brain of the Void Swarm, the source of all their adaptation abilities. If they could not destroy it, more drones would keep coming until the galaxy was consumed. Final weapon check complete, reported Captain Lisa Carter. All kinetic systems are loaded and ready. We have tungsten rods, depleted uranium slugs, and enough regular bullets to fight a small war. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez was focused on his sensor readings. Sir, I am detecting massive energy signatures from the command ship. It is definitely the source of the adaptation signals we have been tracking. Every Void drone in the system is receiving instructions from that vessel. Admiral Zixtara's voice came over the communication system. All Alliance ships, this is your final briefing. We are about to attack the most dangerous enemy the galaxy has ever known. But thanks to our human allies, we now know how to fight them. Remember, keep your weapons simple and your shots true. General Vorthak added his own message to the fleet. My fellow warriors, today we learn that sometimes the best technology is no technology at all. Today we fight like our ancestors fought, with metal and momentum and the basic laws of physics. The Alliance fleet moved into attack formation. It was a strange sight to see. Ships designed to fire energy beams and plasma cannons were now armed with modified railguns and projectile launchers. The beautiful crystal vessels of the Keth Empire looked almost crude with their new kinetic weapons bolted to their hulls. The elegant bioships of the Hive had been fitted with metal, launching tubes that seemed completely wrong for their organic design, but Jake knew that sometimes looking wrong was exactly right. All ships begin the attack, Jake ordered. The battle started with the longest-range weapons. The Saurian dreadnoughts fired first, launching massive tungsten slugs using their plasma cannons as propellant. The metal projectiles crossed the distance to the command ship in seconds. Striking the dark hull with tremendous force, the Void command ship tried to adapt. Jake could see sections of its hull shifting and changing, attempting to develop defenses against the incoming projectiles. Energy fields appeared around the vessel, designed to deflect or absorb the kinetic weapons, but just like with the smaller drones, the adaptation systems could not figure out how to stop simple physics. The tungsten slugs punched through the hull like it was made of paper. Explosions bloomed across the massive ship's surface as internal systems were damaged. The Keth ships fired next, their crystal launchers sending clouds of smaller projectiles toward the target. The command ship's defensive systems went crazy, trying dozens of different countermeasures in rapid succession. But every adaptation failed. Metal moving fast enough would go through anything. No matter how smart the target thought it was. Dr. Helen Parker was monitoring the enemy ship's behavior from her station on the Defender. Commander, the command ship is trying to coordinate a response, but it is having the same problem as the smaller drones. Its programming has no solution for kinetic weapons. The human ships joined the assault with their railguns and missile systems. The UES Titan fired a spread of heavy tungsten rods that struck the command ship's central section. The UES Constitution launched a barrage of guided missiles, each one carrying a simple explosive warhead filled with metal fragments. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Hayes was preparing his ground assault team for the final phase of the battle. Listen up, people, he said over the Marine communication channel. We are going to board that ship and take out whatever is running this show. Remember your training, keep your weapons simple, and do not let the fancy alien technology confuse you. A bullet works the same way in space as it does on Earth. The command ship was taking massive damage, but it was not going down easily. Ports opened along its hull, and thousands of new drones poured out to defend their mothership. But these drones were different from the ones the fleet had fought before. They were larger, more heavily armored, and they moved with desperate urgency. New contacts, Rodriguez reported. These drones are bigger, and they seem to be protecting the command ship with everything they have. Jake watched as the defensive drones swarmed toward the Alliance fleet. All ships, continue firing on the command vessel. Do not let these new drones distract you from the main target. The battle became a brutal exchange of fire. The defensive drones tried every adaptation technique in their programming, but kinetic weapons remained just as effective against them. However, their larger size meant they could take more damage before being destroyed. Sergeant Amy Foster was manning one. of the Defender's point defense guns, firing streams of 20mm rounds at the approaching drones. "These big ones are tougher," she reported, "but they still go down when you put enough holes in them." Admiral Zixthara's flagship had taken some damage, but her crystal hull was still intact. "Human vessels, we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Without your wisdom, we would all be dead or worse." The Void command ship was beginning to show serious structural damage. Whole sections of its hull were missing, and internal explosions were lighting up the darkness with brief flashes of fire. But it was still fighting, still trying to coordinate its remaining forces. "Sir," Dr. Parker called out, "I am reading massive power buildups inside the command ship. I think it is preparing some kind of final attack." Jake made a quick decision. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command ship's central section. Whatever it is planning, we need to stop it now." The entire Alliance fleet focused their fire on one target. Thousands of projectiles struck the command ship in the span of seconds. Tungsten rods, steel slugs, explosive missiles, and simple bullets all found their mark. The cumulative damage was incredible. The command ship tried one last desperate adaptation. Its entire hull began to glow with strange energy as it attempted to create some kind of ultimate defense system. For a moment, it looked like the vessel might succeed in protecting itself. Then Lieutenant Colonel Hayes and his Marines reached the ship's hull. "Breaching charges ready," Hayes reported as his team attached explosive devices to what looked like an airlock. "These are good old-fashioned chemical explosives. Let us see the ship adapt to this." The explosives detonated, blowing a hole in the command ship's hull large enough for the assault team to enter. Hayes led his Marines inside, their weapons ready. They found corridors filled with strange technology and alien machinery, but their mission was simple: find the central computer and put bullets in it. Hayes ordered. It took them 20 minutes to fight their way to the command ship's brain. When they found it, the central processing unit was a massive crystal structure that pulsed with dark energy. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Hayes raised his rifle and fired a full magazine of armor-piercing rounds into the crystal. The ancient alien technology, capable of coordinating millions of drones across dozens of star systems, shattered like glass under the impact of simple lead bullets. The effect was immediate. Throughout the Kepler 442 system, every remaining Void drone suddenly stopped moving. Without the central intelligence to guide them, they became nothing more than floating pieces of metal. Back on the Defender, Jake watched as the last of the enemy forces went dark. The battle was over. The Void Swarm, the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever faced, had been defeated by weapons that any human soldier from 100 years ago would have recognized. "All ships, this is Commander Morrison," Jake announced. "To the fleet, the enemy command ship has been destroyed. The Void Swarm is finished." The communication channels erupted with cheers in dozens of different languages. The galaxy was safe, and everyone knew who had made it possible. Admiral Zixthara appeared on the main screen, her crystal form glowing brighter than Jake had ever seen it. "Commander Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Defense Alliance, I formally apologize for our arrogance. We called your weapons primitive, but we were the primitive ones. You understood something we had forgotten." "What is that, Admiral?" Jake asked. "That the best technology is not always the newest technology. Sometimes the best answer is the simplest one." General Vorthak added his own thoughts. "From this day forward, kinetic weapons will be standard equipment on all Alliance vessels. We will not make the mistake of thinking that complex means better." 6 months later, Commander Jake Morrison stood in the same council chamber where the aliens had once mocked human weapons. But everything was different now. The human fleet was no longer relegated to cleanup duty. They were the military advisors for the entire Galactic Defense Alliance. The newly built starship, UES Constitution, departed from Concordia Prime on its first patrol mission. The ship bristled with railguns, missile launchers, and projectile cannons. Other species had tried to convince the humans to upgrade to more advanced weapons, but Jake had refused.